morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Gabriel Dusil. I am from Adel Ecosystem Limited. We are a blockchain innovator. We actually are using a community-based model in order to incubate blockchain projects. But I'm actually not here to talk about Adel. Actually, I want to take the presentation further from what Martin Schipp was talking about in terms of cryptocurrencies and take it really to the discussion around blockchain and the opportunities around blockchain. The first thing I'd like to talk about, and I know Pavla was showing some market sizing opportunities in the blockchain space. This is looking at it up all the way to 2024, where IT spending for blockchain will be $7.7 billion. I think you were showing numbers around 2021 at $2 billion, which is somewhat consistent really with what this chart is showing. This is from Grand View Research. We often from a business perspective, like to see a hockey stick-based growth. And I think that's what we're seeing in this blockchain space. I know that Martin is a little bit skeptical about this growth, but if we look at it from the standpoint of all the companies that are involved in blockchain, and the fact that in GitHub, for example, there are 10,000 blockchain-based proof of concepts, and that's just on GitHub. If we look at it beyond GitHub, there's probably several more tens of thousands of projects. So even if 10% of these projects are successful, then it's still going to be a phenomenon. The other thing that's interesting from this chart is that really the area that is expected to dominate in terms of blockchain is in the fintech space. So we're looking at, let's say, 2/3 of the market by 2024 using blockchain specifically in fintech, even though there's a lot of opportunities beyond fintech. Are you all familiar with the Rogers adoption curve? Yeah, the adoption of technology, right? This is quite fundamental in terms of marketing. And what I wanted to do is look at blockchain from the standpoint of the adoption curve in terms of innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards. All technology falls into this curve somewhere throughout its life cycle. And it's interesting to have a discussion around where we see blockchain in this context. So if we were to look at where blockchain started, blockchain as a database was launched in 2009. What happened around 2013 was a light bulb moment for thousands of people around the world, mainly developers, that really saw this concept of blockchain beyond just currency. Satoshi Nakamoto was looking at blockchain from the context of Bitcoin and launching a new digital currency. And then, let's say 5 years later, it was clear that blockchain could be much more. And a lot of new blockchains came out to start to utilize blockchain in a much wider context beyond just currency. And we believe right now that we're still in this early adopter stage where all these new people came on board around 2013, started launching new blockchain technologies, which are now almost referred to as blockchain version 2. So taking blockchain to the next level and realizing, okay, let's use it for other types of industries because it's a database. And Martin said it very nicely that blockchain is not suitable in many aspects of a database implementation. For example, it's not good for, let's say, 10,000 transactions per second. Right, so it's not going to be competing with SAP or Oracle in that context if we need transactions at 10,000 per second. So it's much slower in terms of utilizing and recording transactions, but it does have its place. And part of these proof of concepts will start to weed out the opportunities that can utilize the benefits of blockchain versus ones that realize that it's just not suitable to utilize blockchain for their application. Okay. There's also something came out in 1999. It was called Crossing the Chasm. I'm not if you're familiar with Crossing the Chasm. Yeah, anybody? It was from Geoffrey Moore. So Rogers came out with the adoption curve in 1995, and then in 1999 was this notion of crossing the chasm, where startups have a big jump to go from this innovator stage, this early adopter stage, into the early majority. And that's where they become mature. And blockchain has the same dynamic. How is going to become mainstream? And it's not mainstream. We are in a market that is still developing, and I would venture to guess your mothers don't know what blockchain is, right? It's not a mainstream technology. The way we look at it in Adel is that maybe blockchain will never be a home term. It may become, let's say, like TCP/IP, right? It'll be used by everybody, but they won't realize they're using it, right? My mother uses the internet every day, but she doesn't know what TCP/IP is, even though it's used, she uses it every day. So it may be an underlying technology in the context of various different industries, but maybe people won't actually realize that actually blockchain is the underlying technology. In looking at blockchain today, we believe that we're in the early adopter stage still, and probably until 2022 to 2027. And the reason why I say that is in the next couple of slides, we'll talk about it in terms of how the analysts are looking at the maturity curve of Bitcoin and blockchain into the next 8 years. So that leads into this slide, which is really the hype cycle. You're maybe familiar with the Gartner Hype Cycle. We can again look at blockchain in the context of how mature it is, because every technology falls along this hype cycle of hype, this peak of expectation, this trough of disillusionment where people are disappointed, and then this plateau of productivity, according to Gartner. And we can overlay the hype cycle with the Rogers adoption curve. We can map the two against each other, which I'm not doing in this presentation, but anyway. So if we look at blockchain, we're actually right here in 2017. We're right falling down now in terms of this disappointment. And what that means is that if we're looking at these 20,000 or 30,000 proof of concepts in the world that are happening, there's going to be a lot of disappointment in the next 2, 3 to 5 years. A lot of these proof of concepts will realize, blockchain is just not suitable for our application, it's too slow. The fact that we can't change the records, for example, is not suitable for our application. We don't have a culture in our company to adopt blockchain. And also from the standpoint that if blockchain is going to disrupt monopolies, and it's going to disrupt middlemen and remove middlemen from the equation of e-government transactions or financial transactions, what will evolve from that is a realization that if I'm a CTO and I adopt blockchain, I may adopt a technology that means that I have to leave the company in 2 or 3 years because I'm adopting a technology that won't need me anymore. Yeah? So there's very much of a human aspect to the adoption of blockchain that as it's disrupting industries, it's disrupting the personal agendas of individuals and companies. And if it means that I'm going to have a department that's going to be, there's 200 people now and I have this great empire, and with blockchain I need to reduce that down to 50, that means my empire is smaller. Is that good for me? Am I making a decision because of my personal agenda in building my empire in my company, or am I making a decision that's better for the company, which means reducing costs and making things more efficient, which means that I'm making a decision where I need to leave the company because I'm part of that restructure. Okay, so this is all part of the disruption that we're expecting moving forward. Let's look at it from the actual figures that Gartner came out with about a month ago. Maybe 2 months ago now. I think it was in August. We have blockchain, as I mentioned, just on the downslope. And because it's in blue, we're looking at a maturity of blockchain in 5 to 10 years, which means it's going to reach this plateau of productivity in 2022 and 2027. And that relates to the adoption curve that I talked about before. Right? So, which means that if that is truly the maturity of blockchain, that means that the movement into the early majority and blockchain becoming mainstream will be in the next decade. Okay, so these are interesting studies because one thing that's clear from this is that there's going to be a lot of bad press. There's going to be a lot of bad press in the next 2 to 3 years, maybe 5 years, where the demise of blockchain and the demise of Bitcoin, as Martin was talking about. When is blockchain going to die? And it's already dying. And look at this quotation from the CEO. This is all going to happen. This is already happening now, and is going to be happening into the future. So I think the real testament of blockchain will be the next recession. Let's say that the last recession was 2008, and that there's a recession every 10 years, let's say. But nobody's talking about a recession, so there's likely, in my experience, usually people start talking about a recession about 18 months before it happens. And nobody's talking about it, so it's definitely not in the next 18 months, because nobody's talking about a recession right now. Everybody's talking about growth. The stock market is breaking records, and in the US and around the world, so everything's great, right? But as soon as people start talking about recession, there's a timer that starts and when it will actually happen. Of course, there will be one. We're not immune to recessions. But I think the true testament of blockchain and Bitcoin will be, how does Bitcoin survive? And a lot of my friends that aren't in the crypto space, they're saying, Gabriel, Bitcoin is going to blow up, and it's going to it's going to implode, and all this is going to eventually go away. And I think that's kind of ridiculous. One thing that is clear from a recession is that all the weak players fall away, right? During the internet bubble in 2001, you had the survivors like Amazon and Google, but there were thousands of companies that basically disappeared from that recession. And this next recession will likely result in blockchain startups and Bitcoin-based cryptocurrency startups disappearing because they can't survive a recession. But one thing that I look at, and first of all, let me have a disclaimer. I'm not an economist. I'm engineering physics. I'm actually a geek. So I'm not talking from any expertise from an economist or macroeconomics perspective. It's purely just from a geek's perspective. The question is, how much will blockchain fall? Will it fall 20%? Will it fall 30%? Will it fall 50%? I think it's unrealistic to say that it's going to fall 100%, right? So how much will it fall? So when people are saying, there's this death of blockchain and death of Bitcoin, it's more about everybody thinking that it's going to go from 100% to zero, which is, I think, unrealistic. But it's going to fall. The real question is what the percentage will be. Okay? So the cryptocurrency, the balancing act. There is this balancing act of threats versus opportunity. The threats in terms of regulation, right? This is always a looming threat for the cryptocurrency market in terms of what is regulation going to do to cryptocurrencies. Is it going to stifle the innovation, which means kind of slow things down or stop innovation, or will it fuel innovation? Okay? Of course, any good regulation will fuel innovation, fuel jobs, and any regulation that stops innovation is not good for society. So this is really an open question right now. Governments that are friendly to cryptocurrency, they want to create regulation that fuels innovation, fuels jobs, and fuels the economy. And those that see cryptocurrency as a threat want to stop it. One thing is generally clear is that in institutions, the brick and mortar institutions see Bitcoin as a threat, but they see blockchain as an opportunity. There's scalability issues right now in terms of the growth and the size of the Bitcoin blockchain, and that's leading to the forks that Martin was talking about, to making it more efficient. And there's, of course, a self-regulation of the cryptocurrency in terms of deciding how to fork the Bitcoin blockchain in order to create this efficiency, and also to keep the decentralized nature of blockchain alive so that the control is not held within certain miners, which that are creating somewhat of a monopoly in controlling the blockchain. And the latest one is Bitcoin Gold. The goals of Bitcoin Gold is to split the Bitcoin blockchain because Bitcoin requires now these ASICs in order to mine the blockchain. ASIC is application-specific integrated circuit. Very expensive chips. in order to mine Bitcoin blockchain as fast as possible. So now those companies that can afford these ASICs are the ones that are controlling the Bitcoin blockchain, where other blockchains like Ethereum require just off-the-shelf GPUs, okay, graphic processor units. So anybody in this room could mine in Ethereum or Dash or Waves or other types of blockchains because you just need a GPU or a series of GPUs on a motherboard. Whereas ASICs really require a lot of capital in order to mine the Bitcoin blockchain. So Bitcoin Gold is really an effort to take away the monopoly control from these miners that have these ASICs and put the control back into regular consumers to be able to mine Bitcoin using GPUs because the barriers of entry are much lower, okay? And it's all part of a self-regulated initiative to maintain the decentralized nature of Bitcoin blockchain. And the funny thing is that Satoshi Nakamoto, one of his goals was really to create a cryptocurrency that did not have the monopoly control of governments and banks. And through just the economics of Bitcoin and blockchain, this notion of monopoly has been created in itself. All these miners that became so powerful that they really started to control the Bitcoin blockchain, and that wasn't the intention of Satoshi Nakamoto. He wanted to have a decentralized infrastructure. So the nice thing about the self-regulation of this community is that they want to maintain the spirit of decentralization and no big brother control and no centralized control. So they're by themselves trying to maintain this distribution of power. Okay? Efficiency is an opportunity because we start to remove middlemen. And here we're talking about a destabilization or a disruption of a lot of monopolies that already exist right now in the financial communities because Bitcoin and blockchain remove middlemen from the equation. And it's going to upset a lot of industries and a lot of individuals that play middlemen roles. Okay, there's cost savings, of course. It's well documented, the cost savings. And what we believe one of the biggest opportunities is this big data analysis. Because the internet removed the borders of the world and flattened the notion of sharing of information. And blockchain is just a next version of that where information can truly be shared on a global basis. So government data, that starts to use blockchain can then become a global blockchain for land registry, for healthcare records, for many other aspects of data sharing across multiple industries. That's why there's so much interest right now in the sharing of data. The opportunities that we look at in terms of the top 5 are government, finance, Internet of Things, ICT, information communication technology, and healthcare. And that spawns multiple sub-opportunities and applications in these industries, which has then fueled thousands and thousands of proof of concepts. And we're right now, like I said, in the early stages of the development of these proof of concepts, so it'll be interesting in the next 5 years which ones actually survive. And then really, the sharing of information on a global basis is powerful from the standpoint of statistical analysis, humanitarian research, data analytics, and data mining, which really takes data sharing on a completely new level by utilizing blockchain technology. What I want to talk about are 4 opportunities in blockchain, which are really the low-hanging fruits, as we say in the industry. The first one is this online remittance, where we can utilize Bitcoin. This is really specific to Bitcoin in terms of addressing a emerging market that has little access to banking, that have, let's say, internet connection, but they don't have access to international transfer capabilities, or they're so expensive that it's cost prohibitive to transfer money abroad. You have a lot of people that are working abroad. They're sending money back to their families around the world, and they're paying up to 30% in transaction fees the Bitcoin blockchain brings that down to less than 1%. So effectively, even though the Bitcoin blockchain transaction fees are increasing, they're much smaller than typical international transfer fees. The next one is smart contracts, and this is where there's a big opportunity in utilizing programmable code in order to facilitate an agreement between two parties and automatically settle a contract in using programmable code between these two parties with little, if potentially no, human intervention. And these are called smart contracts. So Ethereum is one of the big blockchains right now to utilize smart contracts. This is really where potentially the insurance industry can really be disruptive, because you're looking at an insurance agency that may not be so forthcoming in paying out a certain fee from in an insurance scenario because they need to maintain profitability. So, they may be looking at ways to not pay you rather than automatically have a platform that pays you based on an assurance that event happened. So it's definitely disruptive from an insurance perspective. And next is smart assets. This is really a game changer in terms of potentially logging every single connected device onto a global blockchain that becomes registered. And think of it from the standpoint of import-export of products. So you have products that at the time of manufacture, they don't just have a UPC code, which is the universal product code, because typically you would have a UPC code for, let's say, 10,000 products. They're not individually coded, but they're in a batch process. But now every single device is recorded uniquely on a blockchain. And not only are you recording the manufacturer of that device, but you're also recording the attributes of that device. Maybe it's a printer, maybe it's a refrigerator that's connected to the internet, and you're recording all the granular capabilities of that device so that when it's sent to the consumer, then that consumer can tap into the blockchain to register that device onto the internet. And the traceability of every single device individually can potentially be utilized on the blockchain. It would change many aspects of the import-export and manufacturing industry. The last one is really about the humanitarian aspect. If we were to utilize blockchain in the healthcare space, how blockchain can be utilized in healthcare records. Of course, there's the privacy issues. The privacy aspect in healthcare have already been solved over the last couple of decades in terms of HIPAA compliance in the US and other types of regulatory compliance. We don't have to worry about privacy from the standpoint of blockchain because these have been solved in the brick and mortar industry, and we just apply those privacy aspects into the blockchain. We've dealt with privacy for the last 20 years. It's not a new problem. We just have to implement it. So some records can be public. The record of that individual can be anonymous through an address, and maybe that we can utilize statistical research and utilize the blockchain maybe to solve cancer one day. We have this ideology that it's important to talk about from a blockchain perspective, and I like to mention it because one thing is important to realize is that blockchain is not successful because it's a database. Just because it's technology doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be successful. What has made blockchain a phenomenon is the ideology. Okay? If you're familiar with Paralelní polis, the cafe where you can only pay by Bitcoin, that type of cafe is formulated not because of blockchain or Bitcoin, it's formulated because of an ideology. And this ideology has made blockchain a global phenomenon. Okay, and it's an ideology of no centralized control. We don't assume trust. We use trust from a programmable perspective. We try to stay away from proprietary systems, and we utilize open platforms. We don't want a single point of failure, so we want a distributed network. No middlemen in order to reduce cost, and we don't want a big brother. And that is, even at a basic sense, the ideology that has made blockchain really successful. Okay, so we want it audited by anybody, open source, anonymous users, and have a redundancy and reliable network. But we have issues Okay, there's scalability issues still, and the forks of blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain, are resulting in addressing some of those scalable issues. All these new types of blockchains that are coming out are addressing the blockchain bloat, as we call it. So these blockchain version 2s are trying to maintain a much smaller blockchain size, much more efficiency in terms of the blockchain mining of the blocks. Bitcoin mines within 10 minutes, and new blockchains are looking at mining within seconds. And this is the beauty of blockchain, is that what we may not realize, what Satoshi Nakamoto has done is that he has created money into an app. Okay? And let's put that into perspective. Okay? Imagine the euro comes out, there's going to be new euro version 2. Oh, now we have version 2.1. Oh, now we have version 2.2. It's kind of absurd, but this is the reality that we have with Bitcoin blockchain, is that we have constantly these new versions that improve on the cryptocurrency. And that's the beauty that we're facing, is that now that money is an app, apps are prone and driven to the next version. Right? We're always giving it better security. We're always giving it better features, expanding its capabilities. We're going from blockchain version 2 to version 3 and so on. Let me finish off by saying that Bitcoin was about freedom of money. And with version 2, which was around 2013, and these new blockchains, it became freedom of markets, where we're looking at blockchain to be utilized in multiple different industries. And what we believe the future is where we have freedom of information. We completely flatten the borders of the world and share data on a global basis. And that's one of the real benefits of blockchain moving forward. Okay? Let me finish off by saying that 9 out of 10 people see change as a threat. Okay? Blockchain can be viewed as change, a big change in the IT industry, big change in various different vertical markets and so on. And most people see change as a threat. But there is that 1% out of 10 that sees the change as an opportunity. And some of those 9 out of 10 people will see change as an opportunity later. But the one that sees it first gets the advantage, because they see immediately how to maneuver themselves in order to utilize that change as an opportunity. So are you 1 out of 10, or are you one of the 9? Yeah? Thank you for your time.